Welcome to Raw and Refined, the Gentleman's Hour, where we're going to have engaging conversation with middle-aged black men about what's going on. We welcome you to listen, like, comment, and subscribe with the hope that we will encourage others to join us for future conversations. We always like to start off with a toast. And with that toast, it's because we're gentlemen, and we like to do it raw and refined.
Well, go ahead and start us off there, GK. Tell us what you're drinking today.
Well, here is my drink of the day. So proudly in my Oaxaca, Mexico mug, one of my favorite places ever, the food and drink. But what I am having to drink today is some tea, and it is tea with, I always mess this word up. Is it turmeric or turmeric?
Turmeric.
Turmeric
Yep.
and ginger. And
There you go.
Nice.
it's really, really good. This is what I'm having today.
You're having an anti-inflammatory tea is what you sound
Right.
like.
It's so good,
That's
y'all.
good, yeah. That's a
Trader
stomach happy
Joe's,
tea.
no free publicity, but
Add a little cinnamon to that.
Mhm.
That enhances it even a little bit more.
Yeah,
Ooh.
you get better absorption of the turmeric that way. You're getting all the anti-inflammatories there, brother.
that's what's up. I will do that when I buy some cinnamon.
Buy whole cinnamon. Don't get the cinnamon powder.
Yeah.
You know, get you the actual little pieces of bark.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep.
All good.
What you doing,
All
Doc?
good. Today I'm just doing really a iced coffee, sugar-free, skim milk. I just needed a little pick-me-up and a little flavor, but I also wanted to pay homage to our Puerto Rican brothers and sisters out there, and I want to just suggest coquito as the drink as well. And I know we're getting out of holiday time, but it's always good to enjoy a little light rum coquito as well. So I just wanted to give a little shout out and pay a little homage
Viva
to that as
Puerto
well.
Rico.
There you go.
There
There
you
you
go.
go.
Wepa.
Excellent. Well, we haven't really revealed the topic yet for today's conversation.
You gonna give your drink, my
What-
brother?
what
Or
you
you
that's
gonna
gonna
what
do
I'm,
that with
that's
your
what I'm
topic?
saying. No,
Okay,
that's what I'm
okay,
saying.
okay.
My drink is tied to our topic is what I was
Okay.
about to say. And the audience doesn't yet really know what our topic is about because we haven't introduced it. But our title today is Titans of Black History, Drew, Randolph, and Marshall. Drew being Charles Drew, Randolph being A. Philip Randolph, and Marshall being Thurgood Marshall. And so the three of us are going to be talking about these three titans as they are linked to our respective career paths. And mine is Thurgood Marshall. And so I wanted to have a drink that Thurgood drank. And Thurgood was a bourbon drinker. So he drank bourbon socially. Today I've had this on one of our episodes before, actually, when I joined in with the nephew, with Jonathan, at the last minute during our Beyond the Draft episode. I had some of this J. Henry and Sons. It's a Wisconsin straight bourbon. So
Yo.
age 5 years, it's small batch, is very tasty. So that's my beverage today in honor of Thurgood.
That I have to say, Thurgood, he definitely impresses me as a bourbon drinker.
Hear, hear, my brothers.
You ever
Hear,
read
hear.
any of his opinions or hear him speak? That brother's a bourbon cat.
Yeah. Probably had a bourbon while he was sitting there penning
Right.
some of those
Right.
opinions
That's right.
and
That's right.
saying some of the things that didn't make it into the opinion. These stupid.
Right.
That's
What a
right.
character.
So let's get into it. So as I said, the title for today is Titans of Black History, Drew, Randolph, and Marshall. These men didn't just achieve greatness, they endured pressures so we could occupy the spaces we now sit in. And so what did Black History Month mean growing up, guys? What did it mean to you when we were youngsters coming up? To me, it was really kind of just a collection of stories almost, but I wasn't thinking that deeply about it as a youngster. What did it mean to you guys?
Go
Well,
ahead, GK.
for me, I was very lucky at my elementary school that I had a teacher named Mrs. Betts who made Black History Month the thing. Anybody that went to Emerson Elementary could tell you. She strongly pushed Black history. So every year we would do skits. And so she took it over for the entire school. So we had every Black History Month, we would have programs and we had to do skits or we had to dress up as famous people. So Black History Month has always been really, really special and important to me. And the brainwashing started very early. So Carter G. Woodson was like, for that time, like the coolest cat ever, according to Mrs. Betts. Always looked forward to Black History Month.
Yeah, I was gonna say, remember to acknowledge that brother Carter G. Woodson, and first the establishment of the week and now the month. I think 1976. President Ford at the time enacted it and been that
50
ever
years.
since. And for me, it was started, I'll say my true understanding and appreciation of Black history was when I was able to attend a small, it was actually a private school in south side of Chicago called Faulkner School. It's no longer in existence now, but folks like Common went there. Some other knowledgeable folks attended Faulkner as well. But it was really an all Black, majority Black institution in the south side of Chicago, right over there by South Shore Cultural Center. And it was there that I really was able to appreciate what it means to be Black, man. I mean, what it means and opportunities that were there for us as well. That was where I really started to learn about Black history and appreciate all the richness that we have. And from there, we all met up at Proviso East High School. And then I continued my journey on to Howard University, the Mecca, and just, again, an opportunity to just dive in and just embrace all that richness around us, man. Possibilities beyond the sky as well. And it's been great, man. I mean, just this is something that, of course, we know we don't just celebrate in the month of February. We celebrate and honor throughout the year. But this has, quote, been designated as a month for all folks to really try to pay honor and respect to what has gone on throughout our history as well.
Yeah. I don't think when I was Greg, I was at Roosevelt, you were at Emerson.
Yep.
We did a lot of those same type of things. Black History Month, we did the plays, we dressed up and did all of the things. I think somewhat in high school, they shifted from being names and symbols to being more than that. But I think that was later, maybe in high school, but definitely in college. They moved from just being figures to being more meaningful. And I think part of that was in college. This was my own self-study, my learning. I really focused on African history and African-American history and just the study of Africa. I studied several languages during that time. And so my view of Blackness was expanding. Was definitely expanding at that time. But yeah, probably college was when I was really starting to understand that these were people who were they were doing their thing. It just happened to be that they were really incredible at doing their thing. And that I think made it a little more real and then also made it a little more attainable.
Yeah.
I could actually do some of the things that these people did. In this case specifically, Thurgood Marshall was that huge impression on me, may have contributed to me wanting to be a lawyer, even though I can't say that for sure because apparently I wrote my first contract when I was like 5 or 6.
Okay.
Something like that. The mom still held on to it. I wrote a contract to get paid for doing chores around the house.
Housework.
Okay.
Yeah, it was an actual contract. I saw it a few years ago. The mom was cleaning out stuff. And then there was an assignment when I was a kid in school, second, third grade or something like that about my future. And I said I was going to be a corporate lawyer, married to a model. I was going to have some sons. One was going to be a professional athlete and some other stuff. So I don't know when that part got hardwired in that there was going to be a lawyer in my path. But at some point, I did make that connection to Thurgood Marshall, that he was probably the greatest lawyer of all time, in my opinion. But we're not just discussing history today. We're talking about men whose shoulders we're standing on, but really specifically connect to him very specifically. Charles Drew was an incredible physician, scientist. Dr. Charles Drew and Dr. John Card, Black physician. A. Philip Randolph, organizer extraordinaire, the man that stared down the president and said, what? And looked him in his face and said, you're going to deal with, no, we're not going to have 50,000 people there. We're going to have 100,000. You keep messing with me, we might roll 1 million up to that joint. I'm exaggerating right there, but organizer, leader, creator of a union out of nothing. GK over here, labor leader. So we got that connection. And then, of course, I just said Thurgood Marshall, in my opinion, the greatest trial and appellate lawyer in American history, especially when you narrow it down to the SCOTUS, to the Supreme Court of the United States. And me, former trial lawyer, now turned dean. So that's the real connection for the three of us. So this isn't nostalgia. We're talking about literally standing on the shoulders of greatness and inspiring us in the paths that we have chosen. So we're going to start this thing off with Dr. Charles Drew. And Dr. John is going to take on Dr. Charles Drew.
Yeah, this is exciting. I've always been an admirer of Dr. Charles Drew. And at times you may hear me refer to him as my late brother, Dr. Charles Drew, as he was a member of Omega Psi Phi Fraternity Incorporated, and proud of that as well. But to research our brother Dr. Drew and all his accomplishments just continues to be amazing, especially in the field of medicine. This man had the foresight to understand how to preserve plasma in a way that helped to save millions of lives, and still saving millions of lives to this day. At the time when it was kind of first in use was back in World War II. And again, think about World War II, the status of Black folks at that time. And here you had a Black man leading the effort in how to help save lives during a war that we were only a fraction of involved in. You know what I mean? With that, it allowed others to see his greatness. And he was then appointed as the director of the American Red Cross. Again, this is just something that you didn't really see that much of at that time of our nation's growth. But then that brother said, I'm through with y'all. And the reason why was because he stood on principle. They had policies that they wanted to enact that would exclude African Americans from being able to receive the very products that he helped to develop. And he stood on principle and said, no, I'm done. I'm leaving. This is not what this is about. I'm not going to be the face of this when you're not going to allow people that look like me to be able to receive this life-saving opportunity. And then from there, he went on to, again, my alma mater, Howard University, where he was a professor at the Howard University School of Medicine and chief surgeon at what was then known as Freedman's Hospital, now Howard University Hospital, and was integral in training many Black physicians prior to me. And just to know that and see that has just been truly an inspiration.
Yeah.
So that's just a little reflection as it relates to who Brother Dr. Charles Drew is. He was an athlete. Let me acknowledge that as well. This dude was actually a great athlete. He played many sports such as football, baseball, basketball, track, all of that while working towards his goals. He married a woman who was a professor at Spelman. So again, another kind of subtle connection there as well with Spelman College. My wife being a Spelmanite as well. And he's from Washington, D.C. Again, imagine this young man growing up from Washington, D.C., Dunbar High School, was able to go on to Amherst College and then get his medical degree not only from an institute in Montreal. He got that from McGill University, which is actually in Montreal, but then he also received a Doctor of Science from Columbia University, and then be able to continue to do all that he has done and his achievements as well. So yeah, so that's just, a little background history on Brother Dr. Charles Drew. But if I bring it back to how it reflects on me, not just those connections that we have, but it gives you hope. And the hope was that I can achieve. This is where I was talking earlier. I didn't really understand that until I got to Faulkner, and then got it just understood even more at Howard University. But I knew I could be a physician. I knew I could do that and do well at that as well. So I'm appreciative of him laying that groundwork. I definitely stand on his shoulders to try to help continue that process of growth as well. I still would say that even now, as a Black man in medicine and even in executive levels in medicine, there's still a lot of pressure. there's still a lot of pressure to be even more than your colleagues that are in similar positions as you. And I would say I'd hope that that would change over time, but I still feel that pressure. I still feel it internally. I won't say anybody externally is necessarily saying that, but there's
Mm-hmm.
still the feeling that you have to be 5 steps better in all aspects in order to be recognized even close to equal. And in today's society, it's making it even harder to have that presence as well. So there are things that go on, and I have to say that I've been pretty blessed to be with an organization that has been encouraging of diversity, equity, inclusion, those 3 dirty words that are now out there, but mean so much. The institution I work for keeps that as a high regard and promotes it, encourages it, has people in position to help make sure that our organization still understands it and understands the importance of that. But I know that that's not everywhere. And I have colleagues, right down the street at another institution that they don't feel that way.
Mm-hmm.
And it's there. We still have to be able to acknowledge that who we are as a people are exceptional and we have opportunities to provide a lot of growth, wellness, and uplift to our whole society as well. So those are just a few things relates to a little insight right there.
So what
Yeah.
resonates most with you, John? What about Dr. Drew do you most see in yourself?
I think understanding that we are here to take care of people. That's what I feel resonates the most is that this is, again, a man who understands the importance of community, but also understanding the importance of the world around our community as well. And that we have to be able to help all to help any. And that's the biggest message I think resonates in me is that, yes, I'm a proponent for the health and wellness of our community, but I also understand that by doing so, we're going to continue to help everyone in society as relates to whatever that need is as well. And I think from Dr. Drew, that's been one of the biggest messages that I continue to carry on with me.
That's dope. His focus might have been here, but his impact was here. He was thinking about this group or these people are solving this problem, and it just turned out that his solution was universal.
Right, right.
Yeah. So one of the things, John, that was at that time was obviously a big deal, and I think it's still a big deal to a certain extent. But but I'm interested in your opinion about this. Does the Black community still struggle with trust in healthcare, and how big an issue is that today compared to, say, during Charles Drew's time? Is it the
Yeah,
same?
I
Has
think
it
that's
gotten better? Has it gotten worse? What do you think?
excellent question, Rich. And I will say it's probably hard to truly measure if there's even more distrust versus the level of distrust that may have been during his time. I just think because of how society has just evolved in some ways. But it's still there. There's still concern about the healthcare system, and there's now to be to be honest about it, there's now science and research to verify that or validated rather. And that is, we've got studies that do not reflect the entire society, do not reflect African Americans, yet that's how we base care, therapy, and treatment. What those studies have shown. So we are still in the process of trying to have people of color to be involved in research, to understand that the impact that we can have and know that research now is a whole lot different than research then. We now have input, we have say, we can say, yep, I'm willing to do this, but not willing to do that. And all of that has to be laid out and laid down before you get involved with research. Then and earlier, it was not that way, but yes.
What happened within like the last year or two, specifically with high blood pressure as it relates to Black people? Wasn't there some change in like I don't know what you call it, the rules for
The guidelines?
for treating high blood pressure for Black people? Was it like, because it was like for decades none of the data really involved black people, and they were giving us drugs that really weren't working for us. Can you put that in a proper context?
Yeah, I think it goes back to that as well, that a lot of the research that has been done on hypertension, diabetes, things of that nature, we do not have a lot of people that look like us in those studies. So a lot of it was extrapolated data to how we take care of people. Well, then it got to a point where it looked like there were certain medications that Black folks were more responsive to, and therefore that became kind of the leading charge of treatment. However, we've since come to understand that some of that thought process was actually not as accurate as well. And we were again missing out on opportunities that could help save, prolong our lives because we weren't getting the medications that can help us in those aspects as well. So that even goes like vitamin D deficiency. Let me just throw that out there for a quick moment. The history and the education was that Black folks don't get vitamin D deficient. Well, the reason why was because they thought it was because of our dark skin was the reason why. Well, in essence, we now know that our melanin in our skin actually reduces the opportunity for vitamin D to get absorbed into our systems like folks who are not melanated. So, but people weren't, they decided, well, we're not going to check that in Black folks because it's not going to be the case. You start checking, you like, well, wait a minute, we're getting vitamin D deficient as well. That's why we stressed out, upset, getting brittle and bones breaking down and stuff as well because of that lack of knowledge back in the day. So there's still a lot that needs to be done. There's still a lot that we have to advocate for, but there's also a lot that we have to be willing to participate in. And that's been a
Studies.
huge effort, right? Is that we have to get folks involved for us to truly have better idea of how do we need to be treating us as well.
Right. We can't complain about the lack of studies if there are no black people that are willing to be studied.
Exactly.
But that goes hand in hand with that trust thing, right? Because everybody
Exactly.
knows about the Tuskegee, right? And
Right.
so it's
Just some of that stuff that went on, man, and
exactly.
had a form of fashion, but at the detriment of our folks, our people,
Yeah,
man. And
done
now there's
unethically, it was
right, and
very
there's
unethical.
newer stuff going on with our Latin brothers and sisters as of similar aspects of treatment and care as well. So,
And
man,
over in
it's
Africa, there's been a few shady things that's
yeah,
happened in the last decade in terms of studies done over there. So
exactly.
I'm gonna hit you with one more question.
Yeah.
If Drew walked into your hospital today or your medical facility, what would impress him and what would disappoint him? Your
Man, I
best
like
guess.
this question. Yeah. Because one, I think that Brother Dr. Drew would be impressed in at least seeing faces like ours in the facilities, in our clinics, taking care of people and not just our people, but all people as well. And I think that would at least give him, or I'd hope that that would give him some, yeah, I guess it's still going on. This is great to see that we're involved and we don't just have to be in the Black institutions to be able to have an impact. But I would also say that he would probably be disappointed in the fact that why are there still so few? Why are still so few faces doing this? And as relates to medicine, the Black ratio of providers has not changed in like 20 years. We still approximately 4% of the medical environment, man. That makes no doggone sense over this time. And even less so Black men. So we got to figure this out. We need more of us to help take care of us and help take care of our communities as well. And we're looking for the solutions, for the answers, for the how. STEM, a big thing in our community, in order to get the interest there. But also we understand that it's levels of education, it's debt, it's opportunities, and it's things like that that is impacting why that is as well. And we just have to find ways to reach our children younger, to get them interested in it in order to continue to see that growth. There's not a lot of us we've had our podcast on mentorship as well. And there's not a lot of us out there that can mentor the masses. You know what I mean? I mean, we're
Right,
only so
right.
much, and we have only so much that we can offer as well. But hopefully, making some impact in those that we are able to touch as well. So it's a lot, brothers. It's a lot that we have to continue to try to support, promote, and educate our communities about. So those would be the things I would think Brother Drew would be impressed with, but also still find some disappointment with. I think he'll love that he sees people of color in levels throughout the Institute of Medicine now, not just aides or orderlies, but nurses, phlebotomists, physicians, and even vice presidents, and even presidents of some of these organizations as well, these institutions as well.
Thanks. That's dope.
yeah. Dr. Charles Drew.
Sir, yes, sir.
Now,
Say it proud.
what was the physician that did the open heart surgery here in Chicago at
Was that
Providence?
Dr. Hale?
That's it. Daniel,
Mhm.
does it, not
Daniel Hale?
Daniel Hale. Yeah. Those two names kind of were front and center in terms of medicine growing up.
Dr. Daniel Hale Williams.
At Providence Hospital.
That's it.
Right. Yep.
Providence
That
Providence
Hospital.
Hospital, brother. That's
right
it.
over there on
Yeah,
what was that on 51st?
still
Yep.
there.
Yep.
Well, for me, one of the interesting things about A. Philip Randolph and what strikes me about all of these men that we're talking about is that they really were contemporaries of each other, right? It's kind of striking to think about.
Mm-hmm.
A. Philip Randolph, to me, is just like one of the more fascinating men in history, because he wasn't, you think about a Dr. King, you can hear his voice. You think about a Malcolm, tell me, what does A. Philip Randolph sound like, right?
Right.
It's not someone that you think of as speaking, but you kind of know the name.
Mm-hmm.
He's a fascinating guy. Born in Florida, of all places, the son of a preacher. And the thing to me that's most striking about A. Philip Randolph really is his longevity. And he was 90 years old when he died. And he started organizing very young. But one little fun fact that people don't know, he went to Cookman, by the way, before it was Bethune-Cookman.
Okay.
But he moved to New York and wanted to be a Shakespearean actor. And so he was kind of trained as an actor. So as I joked about not knowing his voice, he was known for having this baritone voice that obviously worked to his favor throughout his life. But he's just a fascinating guy. He predates sort of the Harlem Renaissance, when he went to New York. And he founded a newspaper, The Messenger, with another guy named Chandler Owen, who, while he was in law school, Chandler Owen was in law school at Columbia when he first met A. Philip Randolph in New York. And they published this paper that was pretty radical in terms of its politics, but it became very, very well known. And coming out of that is where A. Philip Randolph famously started organizing Pullman porters through the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters, which was the first Black official union in the United States. And so he read Du Bois, and then later on, he started organizing workers, and then said in 1941, Roosevelt, we're going to march on Washington, like you mentioned, and threatened to send hundreds of thousands of Black folks into D.C. in the middle of World War II. And so Roosevelt relented, and we saw some progress, certainly in the desegregation of the military. But then Randolph's story continues, right? He started connecting later on in the 50s with younger organizers like Dr. King. And then it all culminated with the March on Washington in 1963. Of course, what's tragic about that story is that his wife, Lucille Campbell Green, who is an organizer in her own right, a phenomenal woman in her own right, died mere weeks before the March on Washington. And so it had an emotional impact on him, her passing. And so the March on Washington became a global event, and Dr. King cited A. Philip Randolph's leadership in making it happen and him as an organizer. And so one of the other things I would mention about A. Philip Randolph, he was part of the labor movement, but he created organizations that were very critical of the labor movement as well. And so there's an organization now called the A. Philip Randolph Institute, which is kind of an organization that really criticized the labor movement and its racism and mistreatment of Black workers and their failure to organize Black workers. A. Philip Randolph, just a phenomenal cat who really still doesn't have the type of stature that I think he deserves. in terms of organizing, not just for workers, but also for civil rights and human rights in the United States and in fact, around the world. Just a phenomenal cat. And I think A. Philip Randolph, funny enough, John, think he's a Sigma. But we all know Thurgood
Yep,
Marshall
he
is,
he
is an
is.
alpha. One
Yep,
other fun fact about A. Philip Randolph and Lucille Campbell Green is that she actually went to Howard as well.
yep, yep. These little interconnections there. So that's the
Yes.
thing, man.
Yep. Yep. So for me, A. Philip Randolph, I think as someone who's been involved in the labor movement for 30 years or so, A. Philip Randolph was always kind of an inspiration, but not because he was out front giving speeches. A. Philip Randolph was the one very often behind the scenes. Him and guys like Bayard Rustin and like I mentioned, Chandler Owen, all these great men who were critical to the advancement of civil and human rights, but weren't sort of in front of the camera, weren't exactly household names, although A. Philip Randolph kind of became one. But their organizing behind the scenes is what to me is most interesting. They weren't seeking the spotlight. They really wanted to do the work of advancing civil and human rights behind the scenes. That's part of why A. Philip Randolph to me is so important. Like the work he did in organizing people without being in the spotlight is truly remarkable.
Excellent. So, GK, in light of your understanding of the history as well as your current work in labor, would you say it's easier today, harder today, organizing workers?
Oh, wow.
You know, I'm going to do giving you the sports dilemma, right? I'm asking you to compare eras.
Yeah, it's an interesting question. I think it's an interesting question. My instinctive reaction is to say it's much more difficult to organize in the sense that the laws are far more hostile to organizing workers today. But at the same time, A. Philip Randolph sort of created a blueprint about how you organize workers outside of sort of the law and doing it in ways that really builds power. And so a lot of what we wrestle with today is how do we organize workers outside of sort of the normal laws and rules that limit organizing? And so it's kind of a return to the ways in which organizing was most successful. By the time the 50s and 60s rolled around, 35% of all workers in the United States were organized into a union. Today, that number is probably like 8 or 9%. And so it's in part because of the ways in which they organized. And they didn't rely on government to allow them to organize. They just organized and then put pressure on employers to recognize them. And in the case of the Brotherhood of Sleeping Car Porters, they said to the Pullman folk that we're going to organize. And so there were a lot of fights, and Chicago is central to a lot of those fights, but it was the way in which they communicated with each other, the commitment that they had with each other. They didn't care what the law said. They just came together and understood that through their collective power, that they were going to be able to make change. And that's what happened to the Pullman porters. Legally, it's harder. Yeah. I'm sorry, say it again.
No, what you were saying was making me think about, I've often said that people haven't really changed much. What has changed is our technology. How does technology influence my prior question? What role does technology play in organizing? That's
Today.
Something they didn't have back then, right? We didn't have social media. We didn't have the internet. We didn't have cell phones, et cetera.
Correct.
How does that kind of play into things?
It's a great point. There's a way in which the A. Philip Randolph model of organizing was really community-based organizing. I live in Mississippi, right? But I'm taking trains with people up to Chicago. And like you're transporting people, you're creating community. And so those jobs became middle-class jobs and everybody wanted them because the community saw them as respectable positions because they were really adept at organizing community. People saw those porters as important pillars in the community. Today, technology requires us to think about community in different kinds of ways, right? It challenges us in some ways, but it also is a good thing in another way. You can meet with someone halfway around the world digitally now. You can organize people without being in person. And that has been really sort of a game changer for organizing in the country. And I would argue that that's just not true for labor unions. That's true for politics, that's true for all types of church, right? Faith community, all types of ways in which people gather themselves and organize themselves. It's just different and more possible because of technology. Now, you can talk a lot about how deep that community is because there are some limitations that you have through technology, but your reach, if exercised properly, is much greater, and you're able to do it more consistently. But that's not just true of organizing, but that's true of biz. You could say it about pretty much every aspect of society. But again, the idea is, how do you create community of interest for people to come together to fight for their collective interests?
Isn't it amazing? I just wanted to interject, Rich, before you ask another one, is that part of the conversation has been at a time where information was still getting around to people. I mean, think about what A. Philip Randolph was doing even before the famous March on Washington in the 60s. He had already done something similar earlier than that, but the lack of communication or the difficulty with communication was even greater then. And then 60s, but now it's easier. But we still had networks in some form or fashion that we were able to get information out there and impact some meaningful change. So it's just an observation, that nothing more to that. Just as you were talking about it, it made me think about, wait a minute though, but they were organized. They were getting it together, and wasn't just quote in one spot. They were getting this done in multiple locations as well. So
Yeah, that's because
telegraph
networking
or
is,
whatever, right?
yeah, networks aren't technological, right? It's not a technological term. I think nowadays people think of networks meaning some technological, something involving data or electricity or electronics or something, but networks are just connections, right?
Yep.
They are connections that allow communication, or that
Yep.
allow the transfer of information, but they don't have to be technological in nature. But we're going to revisit this question in 5 years, Greg, because then we'll be talking about the impact that AI has had on everything and see how that changes things, because that's a real ongoing thing. But,
It
in the
is.
context of organizing again, what's the stress of negotiating for thousands of people like? Just because that obviously will not have changed, right? That was a similar stress for today and in Randolph's time, because you're serving the interests of others. They're trusting you to fight on their behalf. So what's that like?
Yep.
What's the stress of that?
Yeah, it's most of my career has been spent leading tables, leading negotiations. And I jokingly say that the hardest part of negotiations isn't management telling you no. It really is about getting folks to understand the power that they have through their work, right? That in fact, it is through collective action, collective effort, that we'll be able to make the type of change, or at least to demand things that management can't say no to. And so it's a challenging thing. There's to be ongoing communication and conversation. It's also about trying to manage expectations, whether they're too low or too high, sort of to having people imagine what's possible versus what is. And so it's a challenging thing, but I've found in this current moment that people are more willing to take chances. I think people understand better now that nothing ventured, nothing gained, right? People understand the old Frederick Douglass maxim, right? Power concedes nothing without a demand, and that there is some risk involved with progress, right? And that demand requires some risk. And so I think it's an interesting moment. I think employers and management places are all over the place on it. Some of them respect and understand the power of the people that they employ and their need to come together. But then you also have employers that are hostile to it and that are willing to do whatever to protect their interests at the expense of their employees or of workers. And so it is a slog often. It is very stressful, but it's also can be a lot of fun and inspiring, especially when you see people go from struggling to having no rights to building their strength and developing rights that they didn't have before, and then also getting benefits and wages that they didn't see coming. And so that seeing those victories have been those are inspiring despite the difficulties and the challenges with it. winning really does, and putting some W's on the board really is game changing for folks and for me personally.
Nice. All right. Well, now let's dig in a little more here. This will be another you and Randolph, you stepping into his shoes somewhat or trying to, as best as you can, guess how he might have felt. But being in leadership in this type of situation, you're representing people's interests and doing things of that nature. Do you ever feel isolated in leadership?
Absolutely. I think one of the challenges of leadership is that it is isolating. And that's not something people talk a whole lot about. But yeah, leadership, even when you are working with a lot of people, it can be a solitary experience. And I don't know if people always appreciate that. You're representing thousands and thousands of folks. How is it possible for it to be solitary? But it very often is. The decisions that you have to make, the pressures, the assumptions that people have about you and your role sometimes isolates you. And so, yeah, I think especially if you're someone like an A. Philip Randolph, who's a brilliant tactician as much as he is sort of an organizer. He's not a person who just stands there and gives speeches, right? There is value in the standing up and giving speeches, but that's only one part of the story, right? The hard work of strategizing, bringing people together. Isolation in leadership is a real thing. I think it's actually one of the challenges of leadership is the way in which it's a solitary thing in a lot of ways, even when it's involving thousands of people, right? Pressure to make right decisions, the struggle with assessing what's happening. Making decisions is a hard thing sometimes. It's not as easy. And you are forced to be sort of on your own sometimes in making those decisions. And so, yeah, it's a challenge of leadership, but there are various types of leadership. There is the public presentation and the speaking publicly, but then there's the strategizing behind the scenes, which to me is what A. Philip Randolph sort of was really masterful at. He was the one who brought everyone together too, because despite the desire to make things better, you often have to convince people that even though we might have these differences, that it's important that we come together for this common goal. And that's its own set of skills and talents that people don't always fully appreciate. And so A. Philip Randolph was brilliant at it. He can teach us a lot about leadership and how to navigate through troubled waters.
Great.
Excellent. I'm going to hit you with one more question because you said something that really kind of resonated, and that was when you were talking about being at the negotiating table. I know going back to the Pullman Porter thing, right? They used to, back in the day, because it was George Pullman, right? And this was tied. They used to call all of the Pullman Porters George, because that's tied. And people say, why? Well, that's tied. That's old school slavery, right?
No,
Slaves were called the names of their owners, right? Is where that came from. So they all had the same name. They were called by the name of their owner. So if their owner was John Williams, they were all called John, or they were all called Williams, right? But they weren't. So in this case, they were all called George. So when you're sitting at the negotiating table, has anything of it like that ever kind of been in the back of your mind? Not saying that they were calling them George, but something related to that particular negotiation. One of those maybe really,
I think,
foul points
particularly in
that was
healthcare,
out there.
John, and you'll appreciate this, but it's not just limited to healthcare. There's a way in which certain types of jobs are undervalued, and those jobs are often held by people of color, Black folks, and immigrant folks in particular, and very often women. And so those jobs are sometimes they aren't paid right, and they aren't respected, right? We have a saying like respect us, protect us, respect us, pay us, right? And so the challenge is always to get employers, the boss, what have you, to understand the value of those workers. The disrespect that workers face in this moment, and historically, really, a lot of it is attributable to race. A lot of it is very class-based. And so that's again, more of the genius of A. Philip Randolph, right? He understood that workers who were undervalued, underappreciated, really had strong value when it was presented to the employers, right? Like you couldn't run the trains without Pullman porters, right? And so that power, even though people tried to downplay it, really was important. And the dignity of their work was important, and he asserted it as much as he could. And that's what we try to do, to assert the dignity of work is central, right? You can't run a hospital, right? I don't care what you think about janitorial, but you cannot have a hospital that's not clean, right? I don't care
Right.
how great your doctors are. You can't
Right.
have a nursing home without certified nursing
Right.
assistants, right? It
Mhm.
won't work. So respecting the work that they do, their value in those settings is central to what we try to do every day to make sure that their voices are heard and that they are seen.
Yeah. I'd have to say along those lines
Nice.
as well, Greg, that you're right. I mean, I think it always comes down to, I like that mantra, respect us, protect us, pay us. I think that when institutions, organizations are not respectful of the people that really help to keep the establishments running, then we got problems. And we have to continue to be mindful of that, that it's not just in our case of healthcare, it's not just the surgeons that are making all the money. That's okay, they get preference to everybody else. Well, you've got your primary care providers that are there trying to be the front load of taking care of people and in essence recommending these folks to you to get things done that need to be done. But then we have our nursing staff that's there to connect with patients and understand what's going on and help get medications appropriate and accurate when dispensing as well. But then we have our staff, of the folks at the front desk who's making the first connection with
Yep.
people and understanding how important they are, because if they don't like who answered the phone, then they don't care who's back there because they may not even get to what's going on
Yep.
back there. And then, as you mentioned, with the leadership and janitorial staff and all of that's important, man. And it all needs to be respected as such. And organizations and institutions need to continue to understand that, continue to promote that, continue to provide that care and acknowledgement of who folks are. I see that that's in essence how labor unions kind of came about, because folks weren't understand, or they may have understood what they understood, but they weren't being respectful of the folks that were doing some of the menial work or lesser work, whatever you want to call that, but yet how impactful and important that work was
Mm.
for the business to continue to run and prosper as well.
Mm-hmm. 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 Yeah.
I have comments about that with med students and residents
Yeah.
all the time. I'm like, you got to respect the staff, you got to respect the nurses, you got to respect the folks here helping to try to keep these areas clean for us to
Yep.
take care of patients. I mean,
Yep.
you may have gotten the level of education and this title, but don't disrespect the people around you, because they're
Mm-hmm.
important to how you're going to do and how you're
Absolutely.
going to be able to take care of folks. I mean, your
Mhm.
reputation is sometimes impacted by those people around you
Yep.
as well. So you just gotta understand that.
That's so true. Because if I'm thinking about any kind of healthcare facility that I'm
Mm.
in, right, or going to, it's the whole package that I'm thinking about. I'm thinking about
Mm-hmm.
how the people treat me. I'm thinking about what it smelled like when I walked in the door. I'm thinking about what I see when I walk in. I don't want to see wheelchairs just all strewn about.
Right,
Nobody's even, those things are supposed to be
right,
organized over here in this area or things like that.
right.
All of that. I want everything. I want the whole ship in order, everything tight and streamlined when I walk in there, along with the good customer service pieces
Yep.
and ultimately some professionals that actually listen to you and hear you and all of that. So all of that factors in there. So it's all kinds of people involved in all of those pieces of that delivery. And so you want all of that working smoothly and everybody being treated fairly. Because if you treat if you're treating some of the people in the place wrong, then they're
Yep.
not going to do
Yep.
their jobs to the best of their ability, and that's going to impact other things. So,
And as part of that,
everybody
pay
should be
people a
respected.
decent
Everybody
wage,
should be
right?
treated
Because
right.
is you don't pay people well, you have turnover,
Yep.
people don't
There you
stay,
go. Every time.
and that
Right,
has an impact on the delivery of care as well.
Mm-hmm.
right,
Yep,
right.
exactly. Exactly.
Right.
Exactly.
And the ones that do
How
Right.
stay
you
don't
get
care
that
as much.
buy-in if you don't pay people a decent wage? You can go down the street
Quality
and make more,
wanes.
right? Without the hassle. So it's
Right.
a growing challenge in healthcare, and I know
Mhm.
that, John.
Yeah, definitely, definitely. So from saving lives, we didn't organize some
Well,
lives. Now I think we got to figure out
mhm.
how this constitutional aspect of this, especially in this day and age, is impacting lives. And I think your influence is the Honorable
Brother
Thurgood Marshall.
Brother
Tell us
Thurgood Marshall.
Well, go ahead, get yours in, GK. You right?
Well, the one thing I have to investigate or research, because I don't know if he was, but Howard is the beta chapter of my fraternity,
Oh wow,
Sigma Delta
Wow.
Tau, the legal fraternity.
yeah.
That's been around for a very long time.
Oh
Yeah,
really?
that's where
Okay,
I was
okay.
made
There
at,
you
John,
go.
at Howard. Yeah.
That's something
Yeah,
you
The
got in
beta
common
chapter
with
there.
Thurgood.
Yeah, while I
How
was in
about
law
that?
school.
exactly.
Yes, we were there at Howard's Law School where they
Yes,
had the big, beautiful bust of Thurgood.
yes.
Howard's Law School is just gorgeous, by the way. I wish I had attended there just to sit out there out
That's
back on this
beautiful.
one grassy
Okay.
area and just think that it just looks so sweet. University of Illinois College of Law, where I attended, it was a really ugly little building that looked like a
y'all law school,
a 1970s
for
brick
it to be as great
elementary
as
school.
Right.
They at that
it's not,
time, it's
was
dope now,
never
so
as
you can
nice
stop
as
at that if
Iowa's
you
law
ain't been there in a
school.
minute. All
Right
right,
on the
because
river.
they redid it in
modern,
'94.
whatever.
Whatever. Yeah, it's in Iowa. It's in Iowa. Come on now. No, but when I was at the end of my first year of law school, they started a major renovation project. So the next 2 years of my law school career, we were in a building under construction, and they finished it right before we graduated. It was gorgeous. We was like, wow, this is going to be sweet for the future classes. We didn't get to enjoy any of that. But Thurgood Marshall, we've heard about two of the Titans. Now let's jump into the third, the one who has been my career idol in many respects, my inspiration, and that's Thurgood Marshall, from another brother that, had that Howard connection, as you guys mentioned. He went to Lincoln University in Pennsylvania, but then he applied to the University of Maryland's law school, but they had their racial segregation going and wouldn't allow him in. So he got his law degree from Howard University. He graduated first in his class from Howard. And then he began his career working. He opened a law practice in Baltimore, and that's where he first got involved with the NAACP. And then he ended up serving as chief counsel for the NAACP Legal Defense and Educational Fund. And so over time, he became the coldest Supreme Court litigator, in my opinion, in history. Now, the caveat is there's every case that was argued before the Supreme Court. As you go back in history, it's not always clear who argued the case, right? Blah, blah, blah. So I can't definitively say with 100% that he's the one the most cases, argued the most cases before the U.S. Supreme Court. But the fact remains, he argued 32 cases before the U.S. Supreme Court. There aren't many people, and this is what he argued 32 cases before the Supreme Court and won 29 of them.
Wow.
And this was before he later was hired. President Johnson appointed him to be the Solicitor General.
Solicitor General. Right?
Solicitor General is the lawyer that argues cases on behalf of the federal government to the Supreme Court. And that was basically, you could say that's one of those, if you can't beat them, join them, right?
Right.
We got to get this brother away from arguing cases for the NAACP, because he's got a 90% winning record, right? So we're going to hire him on to become the Solicitor General for the United States government. He only did that for about 2 years. Then he was appointed to the U.S. Supreme Court, became the first black man. Well, first he was appointed to the U.S. Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit.
Which is D.C. area, right?
Right. No, Second Circuit, is that? Because D.C. has its own circuit. I forget if it's the Second Circuit.
Okay.
It might be important. That might be Maryland. That might be Pennsylvania. That area. But D.C. has its own circuit, and so he was appointed to the Second Court of Appeals. Then he served as Solicitor General, and then he was appointed to the Supreme Court. Okay. So it was 61 second to the Court of Appeals for the Second Circuit. Then U.S. Solicitor General, that would have been like around 65 or something like that. And then he did that till 67. And then in 67, he was appointed to the U.S. Supreme Court. The first black justice, and he served on the court until 1991. He hung in there about as long as he could.
Right.
Federal judges are appointed for life, right? That's your job for as long as you want it. And he hung in there for as long as he could just like we've seen other justices, they leave once their health reaches the point that it's not sustainable to work anymore. So he did that from 67 to 91. So that's what, 24 years that he was on the court. So yeah, through several different presidencies, presidential administrations, he was fighting the fight for individual rights for that entire time. So he was part of the liberal wing, right, of the court. We've gone through a lot of different iterations of what the court is like, but he had a number of cases that were notable over his time. Probably the most famous one that most people know is Brown versus Board of Education. That's a 1954 case that ended segregation in public schools, rendered racial segregation as unconstitutional. What had been in place for a long time before that was the doctrine of separate but equal. That was a case, Plessy versus Ferguson, which allowed racial segregation and said separate but equal, but in reality, separate was never equal, right? Because if it was if it truly was separate but equal, then that could have worked because that could have worked. If we were getting the same resources, we were getting the same opportunities, we could have a separate school, and I'd be cool with that. And then if our schools actually went up against each other, like Greg said in the one episode, proviso east,
That's right.
Then we could go. This is a meritocracy. Let's see what happens.
Right.
But that wasn't what happened. And so a separate but equal had to go away. Brown versus Board of Education, that was 1954. He had a number of cases before that were of note, and some after that, but he argued a lot of different cases, and these were cases that were brought in different places and spaces by the NAACP. He struck down the Texas white primary that excluded black voters from primary elections. That was Smith versus Allwright. That was 1944. 1946, Morgan versus Virginia. They had a state law in Virginia that required segregated seating on quote unquote interstate buses. And so, yeah,
and
that
probably
was
trains too. Speaking of the polling, anyway.
Yep. Shelley versus Kramer. That's 1948. That case involved racially restrictive covenants, limiting the ability for people to buy property. Because it used to be that you could put in the deed, this property is to be can't be owned by non-whites or things like that. So you could put that in the deed so that it would transfer in perpetuity. So that stuff was wiped out. So a lot of interesting cases over time that he was involved with. His time as the Solicitor General was, like I said, was relatively short. It was only for about 2 years, but he was appointed by Lyndon Johnson as the Solicitor General. And again, like I said, he was the first black person to hold that position, hold that office. That was one of those, it was really about, we need to get him away from some of this other stuff that he had been doing. He's causing too many problems because he keeps winning. The brother just keeps winning.
He keeps winning.
So he is a major historical figure in the dismantling of segregation in this nation, right? Right. You have, again, we got multiple fronts that we were attacking at that time. This was all around during that same time, the civil rights era, right? We're attacking it from all kinds of different directions, and looking at these three titans together, what you're seeing is the healthcare world is being changed. We're seeing the world of labor is being changed. These are things that are all impacting us individually and collectively. And now we're seeing segregation being wiped out. All these stuff. So we're looking at, that's just what's really cool about these three titans we're attacking these major systemic challenges from three different directions, but they're all having a collective impact that's making things a little better for us all. Right. So just really, I don't know any other way to say it, but just really cool to be sitting here looking at and thinking about these cats and the impact they were having. I find it hard to find a comparable era since then where we're seeing the level of collective impact that's coming from so many different directions. Now it seems like all we see about is politicians and musicians and entertainers and things like that. Way too many entertainers. We need, these are true professionals working in their fields. Serious people that are having huge and major impacts on the world as we know it. So
Yeah.
they
Yeah.
all had levels of institutional mastery, right? We're talking
Mhm.
about people that were all at the top of their respective fields,
hmm Yeah.
impacting.
Yeah.
Yep.
And unfortunately, at this time, Brother Dr. Drew had already died. He died in 1950 in a car accident,
Mhm.
kind of before a lot of this was taking form. But I think I've done some reading where A. Philip Randolph and Thurgood Marshall actually had some interconnection on some things, especially civil rights related as well. So I think just seeing that though we have our folks, there was some interconnectivity in some form or fashion with all of this, like you're saying, Rich. And
Mhm.
it's just amazing that at that time it was just a time of people really seeing the need to do something and willing to do it, but also join together in that effort of doing as well. So it's
Yeah.
great.
Yeah.
But I think we want to ask you something now, Rich. You've been
Yeah.
asking a lot of questions, brother, but let us get an opportunity in on this as well. So,
Do your thing. Do your thing.
all
Do your
right,
thing.
all right. So, just thinking about it, as you were a trial lawyer, did you feel like when you were in the courtroom that you were representing more than just the client?
Mhm.
In a lot of cases, I would say yes, because when I was practicing as a trial lawyer, I was doing civil rights litigation, mostly in a work context, right? I
Mhm.
did a lot of plaintiffs' work representing people who were wrongfully terminated for their race or their gender or their disability. So a lot of the work that I did was federal civil rights litigation. And so, yeah, you're representing the individual who's right there beside you, whose case is that. But oftentimes, you were representing others beyond that. I had a case where I was suing Motorola for an engineer who was being racially harassed.
Mhm.
And they brought their basic argument was essentially that this supervisor was an ass to everyone.
Mhm.
Mm.
And so, because you're an asshole to everyone, then you're not discriminating.
Right.
As
Right.
crazy an argument as it is, yeah.
Right.
But I don't discriminate. I treat everybody like crap.
Mhm.
Is the basic that's the
Right.
basic legal
That's the rule of
defense.
thumb.
Right.
Right.
And so in that case where we had to demonstrate that no, you in fact did treat people differently, and you just happened to treat the black employees worse. And so that
Yeah.
was how we were able to establish for this particular client. But yeah, it was really beyond just that client, because oftentimes you're presenting evidence of others, examples of others that are being mistreated, to demonstrate that no, this isn't just in fact how you treat everyone. You pick and choose, that type of thing. So yeah, there were definitely cases where I figured like I was representing more than the client. And then often when I was in the courtroom, I was representing black lawyers, right?
Mhm. Right.
How I behaved could influence how this judge might look at other black lawyers coming into the courtroom. And definitely often the case was of representing black lawyers when dealing with the attorneys on the other side. Many times, like I said, I represented plaintiffs in employment settings. I would often be the only lawyer on the plaintiff side. But when you walk into when you're in the settlement in the judge's chambers, there's 5 white lawyers on the other side, because for some reason people think that a show of numbers is somehow threatening. We're not fighting. We're not fist
Right.
fighting. This is litigation in a courtroom. Having 12
Right.
people there doesn't change
No,
anything, right?
exactly.
The
Right.
facts,
I'm agree on it.
right? The facts are still the facts.
Yeah.
Having more people there doesn't do anything. But there were times when I would be dealing with white lawyers who wanted to try and disrespect me. So there were times where I had to actually check somebody.
Mhm.
And I've had conversations like, not only am I going to win this case, but if you ever say anything like that again, I'm going to beat your ass on the street. I've
I
had
hear
to
you,
say that
brother.
to
I hear
lawyers
you.
while the judge is out of the room and they want to say something disrespectful. No, I'm gonna check that, and then the judge walks back in. Hey, Your Honor, we've come to an agreement.
None the wiser, right?
Right. Right.
Right. So yeah, the short and simple answer is yes, I have. Mhm.
Well, that's obviously a kind of advocacy in the courtroom, and as a trial lawyer, that's a certain set of skills and experiences that I think I've seen you in the courtroom, so I know you've possessed them in spades, definitely back then. But now you're doing a different kind of work, and I'm curious to hear you talk about what are some of the changes that you see, having been an advocate to now serving as an administrator.
I think for starters, it's important to bring your experience to bear. And so I'll say it like this. There are a lot of instances where my past experiences help me to understand how I need to be treating situations. To answer your question about going from the advocate to the administrator, well, as a dean, I run criminal justice and homeland security programs, and so the law is very much involved in what we're doing. I think what informs me most in my work is the notion that we have to keep politics out of what we do. We have to focus on the law, we have to focus on the facts, but we have to keep the personal out of it. You know, when I'm talking about training future law enforcement professionals, future lawyers and judges, because we have bachelor's and master's degree programs, but they could go on to whatever after they leave. And I have a number of students who wanted to go on to law school. But the thing that I'm impressing on our faculty all the time is that your personal politics are irrelevant, right? What our students need to know and understand is that whatever administration is in power, whatever level that they're working at, administration, that authority sets the rules, and you have to apply those rules. Whatever the law is where you have to live, irrespective of the politics. And said the only thing that my faculty are allowed to talk about with respect to politics is that it exists. There will always be politics, there will always be politicians, and they will always in some way impact the work that you have to do. But in the context of being this professional, you have to apply the law in an apolitical fashion. Now, we understand the reality that it doesn't always work that way, right? And that's evident through all of the cases that Thurgood and everyone had to fight. People talk about things like we live in a colorblind society when in fact we know that that's not true, that historically there have been a lot of entities that have worked to make life as unfair as possible. But we can't focus on that. We have to live within the boundaries of the law because and if you don't like the laws, then you take the steps to change the laws. Because we can't advocate to destroy the system when we're trying to train people to work in the system. The system might not be perfect, so we figure out ways to fix that. And that's what these incredible people did, right? We've got structural limitations. We've got structural challenges that can impact how we do things. We do everything we can within those structures, and then we try and position ourselves to be in places where we can attempt to change those structures, right? Randolph stared face to face with the president and punked him. Once he had done the work to get himself in a position to have that power to make that kind of change, Drew used his intellect to force people to accept his greatness, right? I'm creating things that are so impactful, you don't have a choice but to take my technology and widely disperse it. Thurgood worked within the system and was just so cold and made so many changes. They said, dang, we got to move him to we got to give him something else to do because he just keeps kicking our butt. So he ended up on the Supreme Court and was in a position to fight for and advocate for the rights of the poor, the rights of the racially mistreated for decades. So making structural changes. So I think that's what I take from it is that even as an administrator, my role has changed greatly, but I still have an opportunity to influence through the curriculum we create and through the faculty and the messages that they send.
Outstanding, Rich. Outstanding. I think you actually helped to kind of bring us through on how all three of these titans were influential, not only in our society, but institutionally, how they've had to endure many challenges throughout their aspect of existence as well, and how they had to be strategic in all of that as well. And for the thing that always I find funny is how patient we have to be through our strategy. You know what I'm saying? I don't know if you guys have had situations where a white male would just go off, start cussing and banging the table or whatever, trying to get a point across, but don't let that be one of us or someone of color do that same thing and have a level of respect as it relates to that. So that's that strategic patience that all of these titans have had.
Yeah.
And that we've had to maintain and in essence maintain that emotional control at that as well. So
we
you
don't
said
get
it
to be
nicely.
whiny babies.
Right. We don't get to be whiny babies.
No.
Not
No.
and we can't be loud and obnoxious women. You know what I'm saying? Because then we're looked upon as different, and you just an angry black woman and things of that nature. But yet, let someone else of no color say that crazy stuff, and they just yeah, you right, yeah, nothing.
Or when they
It's
way
just
out
a
of pocket,
sign.
they
The
find
Beckys,
rationalizations. They
Yeah.
find
right,
rationalizations. Well, I mean, he didn't really mean that.
right, right, right.
He
And
said
they're
it.
ready to lock us up, right? Because we done gone crazy or something at that moment.
You know,
Yeah, you
Exactly,
well,
chose your
exactly,
emotional control. Emotional control, you're right.
yeah.
exactly.
The-
So,
and the courage, I mean, like the courage that these men had, especially in this
mhm,
period. Thinking about A. Philip Randolph, they
mhm,
started the Messenger in 1917, right?
Mhm.
The height
exactly,
of World War One,
exactly.
espousing left politics just as the Russian Revolution was taken off, and actually wound up going to jail for it, right?
Mhm,
Under the Espionage
mhm,
Act. So
mhm,
yeah, the courage and the wherewithal to stick through it is just for all three of them when there was no
Mhm.
blueprint for what they were
right,
doing
right,
is something that I'm in awe of, really.
right. I agree.
Yeah, when you think about the reality today, we have those blueprints. We have
Mhm,
these
Yeah.
experiences to draw upon. And sometimes
mhm,
we still struggle to find leaders who are willing to even use those blueprints.
Yeah.
correct, correct, correct.
Mhm. Yeah, so
So
the
for each
courage
of you,
piece. Go ahead, John.
what would you reflect upon as it relates to the Titan that you chose? What lesson would you feel we gained from your Titan that's impactful today?
Well, for me, Randolph, it's bringing people together from different backgrounds, right? Different
Mhm,
perspectives. One of the, again, people, we have such a flat version of history, right? We think there was a call for civil rights and then
mhm,
thousands of people got in the streets. When the reality is there were people with different points of view. Some people thought
Mhm.
it was silly. Some people thought it
mhm,
was like, and different opinions in different parts of the country. And so the ability to bring disparate groups of people, disparate types of leadership together, on one accord, to me is one of the most remarkable parts of Randolph that I think more of us should reflect on and try to understand how he did it. He wasn't, again, he could have just limited himself to a certain group of people. He could have just been a union
right,
leader, right?
right.
But he made the connection of sort of workers' rights to civil rights.
Mhm,
And that is a huge thing to have accomplished. I think it was Dr. King like referred to him as a genius or a hero or something along those
mhm,
lines. And so the ability to bring different groups of people together, different leaders together is something
mhm,
that I'm in awe of and I think we could all learn from.
Definitely. I would say, with respect to Thurgood, the lesson that this Titan gave me was being excellent at your craft.
Mhm.
Being superior at your craft can, in and of itself, elevate others. He,
mhm,
I mean, he was a dynamo. He transformed our nation from the perspective of civil rights and individual rights in two different ways. One as an appellate lawyer, and I need to make that distinction from a trial lawyer and an
Yeah.
appellate lawyer.
mhm,
Those are two very different things. And so, very briefly, trial lawyers deal with facts, right? That trials, your trial determines what happened,
mhm,
right? At the end of the day, either a jury or a judge is going to determine these are the facts that happened. And by determining these facts, these things happen. And so now we're going to apply the law to these facts and say this
mhm,
person did this, so they committed this crime, or this person did this, and so they owe this money in a civil
mhm,
context. But that's really about the facts. Whereas appeals are typically about the
mhm,
law, right? It's about the legal issues. Or was this case handled properly? Procedurally, were the proper rules followed? Were the processes in place correct? Was this stuff done fairly? Was it applied equally? Those types of things. At
mhm,
the appellate level, when you go into an appeal, the basic rule is you assume that all of the facts that were determined at trial are correct. We're not arguing the facts. Whatever the judge and the jury decided, these are the facts that they determined. Percent of the cases, the appellate court does not touch those. They say, we're assuming that what this court found was accurate in terms of the facts. Now we're going to see that they apply the law correctly to that. So it's a totally different type of argument. And you're arguing that in many cases that the law as it exists is wrong, was applied incorrectly, or it needs to be changed. This law should no longer stand as it is because of these constitutional reasons. So it's a more intellectual process. It's not about who did what, where, or how. It's about why we are looking at these things this way. Should we be looking at these things this way? Should we be changing how we go about doing this because of what our Constitution tells us? And so he's the coldest one ever at doing that at the Supreme Court level. And then for 24 years, he was the conscience of the nation, not just the conscience of Black people, but the conscience of a righteous nation, fighting for what was right, fighting against that slow 50-year change. So he passed in 91, right? Or he left the court in 91. He passed away in 93. So 91 till now, that's what? 35 years of change. So we talk about in the last couple of years, we've really been talking about under this current administration, the 50-year push that conservatives have been making for the last 50 years to change this country. The last 15 years of his career, he was fighting that. And then it's been 35 years since then. And most of the changes that we've seen have happened in this 35 years. During that 15-year period that he was still in there, they weren't having any success at that. Right. Because he was standing there, he was holding the line. Right. He left, and we got clearance. And you see how things changed dramatically since then. Well, since they let Mr. Mr. Pubic Hair on the Coke can. And obviously, y'all forgot about that.
I forgot.
No, I'm not talking about you all. I mean the world in general.
The world. Yeah.
Oh, is that a pubic hair? Right. She told y'all. He wasn't.
Right.
Tell y'all.
Right.
I'm telling y'all, he ain't nothing.
Right.
I'm waiting to find out if his name pops up in the Epstein files, because he has no problem with taking rich people's money.
Right. Exactly.
Enriching himself.
Exactly.
But so I've gone way off topic, but that's learning from him, just this notion of excellence. I'm pushing the bar way up here, and y'all better come on, because that's where we're at. And so his level of skill, his level of excellence at being an advocate and later being a jurist, just that high level is, I think, what impressed me most. In doing so, things that we talk about with these titans is this notion of endurance, right? They weren't fighting for 15 minutes. They were doing this for a long time, and that means they were sustaining excellence for a long time. So that's my answer.
That's one of the things about Randolph that stands out for me. He again, for a long time, decades.
Right. Yeah, it's Randolph probably the longest out of these three. Have been doing this thing as well. But great points, and for me, Brother Dr. Drew is, I'll say this for him and for all, that what they were able to establish was remarkable in and of itself. But I don't feel like they were our ceilings at all either. I think that was just something for us to aspire to, but definitely to continue to go beyond. So again, going back to our mentorship conversation, that's that whole part, is that I want you to be better than me. I don't want you to be me. I want you to be better than me, and hopefully recall and remember all that has happened, so that you have a foundation to help you continue to leap forward as well. And that's kind of what I get from Brother Dr. Drew, is that remain true to your purpose. I think that was his thing, especially at the time when he had developed or perfected this opportunity to preserve this life-saving material called plasma. And as the director of the American Red Cross, also stood on principle to say, wait a minute, this is for all people. This isn't just for white folks. And I just can't be a part of this. So it taught me, you have to remain true to your purpose, but in doing so, continue to lift as you climb. And that was evident through his going to be established at Howard University through the medical school and through the hospital to help continue to train those that are coming up behind him. It reminded me of all of that I was at a program yesterday, youth leadership conference, and one of the pastors that presented there had a symbol with him. And that symbol was the Sankofa bird. Have y'all heard of the Sankofa bird? So
Oh,
out
yeah.
of Ghana, it's a bird where the image is the feet are forward, but the head is backward. And at times you may see it embracing an egg. And what that symbolizes is the wisdom of learning from the past in order to build a better future.
Mm-hmm.
And again, it just drew me back to my research and thoughts of Brother Dr. Drew in that whole aspect. And that's something that I think we all have to continue to remember, be reminded of that, hey, yes, we may be where we are, but trust me, we did not get here on our own. And there are others that are still trying to achieve and achieve beyond what we've been able to achieve. And we should be those representatives to help them do that.
Yep.
Shouldn't be a part of holding them back. They've got dreams, they've got ideas, and yes, they may have to find ways to shape that into something that's meaningful and impactful, but don't knock them down for having those dreams and goals as well. And if we have that opportunity, make sure that we're helping them to reach those levels and beyond as well.
I think that's really cool. And when you were talking, John, it made me think about just the other day, I was taking a walk in the park because it's unseasonably nice in Chicagoland. For some reason, it's February, but we're getting some nice 50-degree days. So I was in the park walking as I do whenever it's nice. And as I've told you before, when I'm walking, I tend to walk probably about half the time backwards, right? So, and it's easy for me to do in this park because I've walked this park, thousands of times, literally. So I know the terrain. So it always trips people out when I'm walking by and they see me because I'm literally going downhill, uphill in different areas and just walking backwards. But I've got great peripheral vision and all of that works. But yet the other day, I was walking backwards and there was this one stretch. And so I took some film of it, some video of it, just chronicling me walking. I'm walking, my body is moving in one direction, but my view is of my past because I'm walking backwards. So it's just kind of an interesting thing to think about in that way is that I'm moving forward in life, but I've got a clear vision of what's behind me. So I can, in our context here, I want to hold on to those memories of those things that were significant and help to shape and build us as I continue moving forward. So just thinking about that bird and what you were saying. So
man. And what a dope way to think about Black History Month, right?
Yeah.
Gathering all of the stuff that our ancestors and those who came before us, but also having our feet planted forward too, right?
And consistently moving forward, but still keeping all of that in our line of sight and not forgetting it. And so,
Yeah. And this, again, for our listeners, our viewers, this was only a microcosm of what represents Black history. So these were just people that we felt that we wanted to share and how they impacted our lives. But we understand there are so many others out there that have been impactful and doing the thing. So if anything, before we close out, I'm going to just remind you to please comment and let us know who your influencers were as well, because all of that is connected and community. And that's all that I think a lot of this is about, is us making sure we remember the importance of community as well.
Yep, definite call to action. If you're listening to our podcast, the audio podcast, throw your comments in there. If you're watching the video on YouTube, go ahead and subscribe so that you can drop your comments in there as well. We want the conversation to continue. There's a spot on the YouTube where we just have community, right? So those comments can live and we can have continued conversation. And then also, this might spark some ideas where you want us to talk about someone else. That's like John said, that's the beauty of Black History Month, right? You see all this stuff on social media, everybody posting about the different people that you may not have known about, which is just really dope, in my opinion, getting to these little snippets. And so we just wanted to spend a little time talking about 3 titans that impacted us greatly. So I'm going to ask one final reflection from each of us. Are we building institutions today like like these three
Mhm.
gentlemen did, or impacting
Mhm.
institutions. Because in each case, well, A. Philip Randolph built an institution, right? We're talking about the Pullman Porters and what they became collectively after that. Charles Drew did not. Well, he did ultimately, even if he didn't create the medical schools, he was very
Definitely
impactful
is.
in its growth and continued existence today. And
Exactly.
Thurgood didn't build any of those institutions, but he transformed them, right?
Mhm.
So are we building or transforming institutions today? And I don't mean just us three, but I mean
Mhm.
collectively. Are we seeing that same type of building and growing from that era? That was an era of titans, you know. Are we doing that same thing today?
I don't think to the extent that we need to. But what's interesting, and I've said this, that those folks created such durable institutions that we don't necessarily need to build them new ones in a lot of cases. We need to go back, I think, in a lot of cases. There is a need for new stuff, but I also want to say that it's important to reflect on what already exists. And where it makes sense, we can add in and build those existing institutions. No need to reinvent the wheel when it's not necessary, right? So I think we need to all do sort of an inventory of what institutions that just need some direction, need some support, particular set of skills that might make it grow and be relevant again. Really, yeah. So the idea is to build new where necessary, but also build on top of where it exists.
And I think to go along with that, Greg, is that we need to continue to build together. I think there's so many instances, unfortunately, where folks feel they're where they are. And again, as I mentioned earlier, we've got to remember that as a collective unit, something I'm sure Greg can speak to as well, you can do so much more together than you can individually. The individual may spark the idea or
Right.
the wow, but it's really the collective of all that really help to move these mountains as well.
Yeah.
And these titans help to do that. They help to give us those ideas, but they also help to bring us together in order for us to continue to grow and to move forward. I think that's important as we look at this as well. And as we know, man, shoot, all this, we're going to outlive, this is going to outlive us. Let me put it that way. And there are going to be newer challenges and other things. And Rich mentioned it earlier. Now AI becoming a part of this. And I think for us to continue to grow, in my opinion, we have to be able to embrace what change looks like. If we don't embrace change, we are never going to move in any positive or meaningful direction. And we have to be able to understand that, have people in place to help understand what that looks like and help develop the algorithms of what this all is going to happen as well. But again, we need community in order to help make these things go forward. Just my reflection on that one, Rich.
That's awesome. That's awesome.
Any final thoughts, GK?
I think people come and go, institutions that are committed to missions and the vision are what we need to sustain and make things better. And we have so many blueprints about how to do it, including the titans that we've mentioned today. And as you've all said, there are too many to mention. Find someone who inspires you. They may not be someone famous. It could be someone in your family, right? But there are people who can speak to us directly, but that can inspire us and we can learn from to make things better for the future.
Yes, like all of the
Agreed.
cats you see with the hoodies and T-shirts that say "I am Black History." We
Yep.
are Black History.
That's exactly right.
It's
That's
not about
right.
applause. Black history isn't about applause. It's about endurance. And that's what we've talked about with these three titans, right? Is their enduring impact that they've had. And if we're standing on their shoulders, the question really isn't how high we've climbed. It's what we're building for the next generation. To Greg, to your point, we're not necessarily building in every case. Sometimes we're rebuilding, or sometimes we're improving upon what's
Yep.
already there. We're gonna rehab this building. We're not gonna build from the ground up. We've got good bones. We've got great ideas. Now
Yep.
let's take what's already here and let's take it to the next level. So that's what we're talking about, building for the next generation. So
Yes, sir. Yes, sir.
thank you all
Exactly.
for being with us today. This is our contribution to Black History Month. And as always, here at Raw and Refined, thank you and take care. We'll see you guys next
Thanks.
time.
Appreciate you.
Peace.